Hi everyone, my name is Riley Curry. Welcome to my presentation. This presentation is going to be on the levels of burnout for social workers employed at a community social services agency. This particular agency is Franklin County Senior Options that's located within Central Ohio area of Agency on Aging. My presentation is going to be a needs assessment, which is a little bit different than everyone else's. Due to the circumstances of my field placement, I was unable to implement any type of intervention and do an evaluation on that. So, with that being said, I had to go to an outside agency, and the only option that I had to do with a short amount of time was to conduct a needs assessment. Before getting started, I would like to thank Franklin County Senior Options for partaking in this needs assessment at a very short notice. They allowed me to gather all the data that I needed, and it was in a very small time frame, and I was grateful for that. I would also like to thank Dr. Kim for being so patient and working with me through this struggle and allowing me to complete this assignment. So let's get started. The problem I identified for this needs assessment was that burnout is very, very prevalent in the field of social work. And I'm sure, as most of you know, as social workers, this is something that is stressed from the beginning. And we are taught many different ways in self care and working in different environments on how to deal with burnout, how to make sure we don't face burnout, etc. So I chose to look at how burnout is affected employees that are working in a community-based agency. Again, for that, I chose Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging. This is the agency itself. The program that I'm specifically looking at is employees that are working for Franklin County Senior Options. The employees for this program provide many different services to clients who are all over the age of 60. Some of the services they provide are home visits, case management, attending crisis calls, and dealing with other personal situations to ensure that their clients are being well taken care of. They have rather heavy caseloads, seeing anywhere between 40 to 50 clients at a time, in which they are attending to all 40 to 50 clients every month. So as you could imagine, they have very strenuous workloads and a lot of demand that comes along with their job. The evaluation questions that I'm looking at are listed here. First, I want to know if the levels of self-care are related to the burnout rates for employees in a community-based agency. I'm looking at if the number of years worked at this specific agency poses a general risk for burnout given the nature of the services provided and the intense line of work with clients that it requires. And lastly, does the general number of years as a licensed social worker impact the risk of burnout in a social worker? So not only am I seeing if there's a correlation between self-care and burnout factors, but also between how long someone's been a licensed social worker in burnout and how long they've worked at a specific agency in burnout. For this population, my interest is in community-based social workers. And for the sampling method of community-based social workers, I did a non-probability convenience sampling method in which, again, we used a subgroup of the agency, which is Franklin County Senior Options. All employees used for this assessment were employees of Franklin County Senior Options, specifically within the entire agency of COAAA. Using the non-probability convenience sampling method, it ensured that I would be able to get a significant amount of data within the specific department, especially given my short amount of time limits. I needed to make sure that I was able to gather data quickly on a significant amount of people. Non-probability is basically showing that all of the employees within this specific program are seeing the same number of clients, they're all providing the same type of services, they're all working the same amount of days, times, everything within them is very similar, leaving for no room of probability. And the convenience method comes from when I collected the data, I simply went into the agency on 2 separate occasions and basically just asked who would volunteer to take the assessment on who was conveniently available that day. Unfortunately, this type of sampling method doesn't capture a huge sample from an agency, but again, given the circumstances, using the non-probability convenience sampling allowed me to ensure that I was gathering enough data to look at the employees within a specific program to be able to see any type of burnout rate that they may have. The recruitment of participants were again solely based on convenience. I passed out 20 different surveys to employees in hopes to get 20 back. I ended up getting 15 back, which is more than half of the employees for Franklin County Senior Options program itself. So it was a good representation of this specific program, not necessarily the entire agency. Some other relative characteristics that were used in sampling that were reported on the assessment were the number of years employed, number of years as an LSW, and I had initially asked for people to identify their gender, but I decided that due to the agency having more females than male identifying, that I would disclude the gender from my final data analysis. Assessment method and rationale. The assessment method that I chose to use for this particular needs assessment is called the Maslach's Burnout Inventory, MBI for short. This burnout inventory was created by Christina Maslach and Susan E. Jackson in 1981, in which that is when it was published, and it has developed over time. This assessment method consists of 22 questions in 3 different categories: emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and personal accomplishment, that are all considered to be under the Human Services survey of this inventory, in which they basically capture an overall level of burnout within employees in the human services type places of employment. Additionally, I added on a self-care question and the demographic questions as mentioned earlier. My rationale for using this assessment method is that burnout is a psychological feeling of being emotionally exhausted due to intense work, depersonalization from clients, and need to care for them ethically. When an employee is feeling burnout, it can really affect the type of work that you're providing to clients. So it is important to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves and not having this burnout feeling, to ensure that we're providing our clients the best possible presentation of ourselves. This specific assessment or inventory was specifically created to measure the aspects of the burnout syndrome. So that is why I chose to use this, because it is very well supported and there is a lot of evidence backing up how this MBI can capture such a overall view of someone's burnout level. I then took the results from the MBI and compared them to the self-reported self-care level, and I also used them with the number of years somebody was employed at the agency and how long they've been an LSW to determine correlations between burnout related to those other factors. Measurement. For the measurement of this assessment, the key Latin structure was burnout. So everything we are looking at is centered around the factor of burnout. Through this, I use a standardized scale, which would be the MBI, and also an individualized rating scale so that the employees could rate themselves on self-care as well. I use the same scale that the MBI used for the self-care reporting, which you can see on the slide. It goes from 0 to 6, and employees were able to select which level that they best personally feel relates to their life. From this, the scores were then gathered to determine an overall level of burnout from 1 to 3, 1 being low, 2 being average, and 3 being high. In the measurement, I also used 3 different independent variables: personal rate of self-care, the number of years at the agency, and the number of years as a social worker, which are the 3 factors that I have been using throughout and mentioned earlier. And the dependent variable, which is the level of burnout, is the only dependent variable that I have used, as the independent variables are all going to be in correlation with the one dependent variable of burnout. Reliability and validity of this specific assessment, the MBI, were both shown in many different studies. For reliability, the Kronenbach Alpha Reliability Test was used across several studies to support the 3-factor structure and the internal reliability of the assessment tool. And the validity was also tested through many different studies, in which construct validity was proven in many different studies, supporting the factor analysis and how the test predictions provided fairly consistent evidence for the utility of the MBI across many different levels in many different studies. Therefore, I felt rather confident. Data collection strategy, I specifically used only the MBI as a means of assessment, and then added in 1 question related to self-care and the self-reported demographics that employees were able to fill out at the top of the assessment. I personally handed out the assessments to the workers at the agency myself. That way I would be available to answer questions, or if they had any comments based on the assessment or confusion regarding how the results would be produced. And all of the assessments were completed within Franklin County Senior Options at COAAA. Some of the data collection issues that I found were that employees were skeptical on answering truthfully, as they were afraid that if the results were to get back to the agency, that they might put their job in jeopardy if they're feeling a certain way. Some people were having good days versus bad days, potentially feeling more burnt out compared to other days, or having a really good day compared to most bad days. Surprisingly, a lot of the employees at this agency had been there for a very long time. So I initially assumed that burnout levels were not going to be very high, given that the number of people that have been there for a very long time was high. And some people were just way too busy that day to be able to take a 10 to 15 minutes to complete the assessment. So that was another issue I had with getting more than the 15 people that I were able to collect from. Data analysis, using the MBI, the higher the scores were in emotional exhaustion and depersonalization sections would indicate higher burnout rates and a higher risk for burnout with certain employees. And a higher score in personal accomplishment would indicate a lower risk for burnout in most employees. And again, this is what was used to determine low, medium, and high levels of burnout in our analysis. The overall assessment goal was basically, again, to determine if there are high levels of burnout in community social workers. And to find this out, I used two different types of analysis. The first one is univariate analysis, and the second one is bivariate analysis. Univariate analysis looks specifically at one variable of data. For this, we'll use burnout, and it is only taking the data from the self-reported burnout. First, we'll take a look at the bivariate analysis. From this, you can see three different scatter plots in which the bivariate data is represented. In the top left corner, we have burnout related to self-care, in which you can see that for the employees in this agency, there is really no consistent burnout to self-care correlation, in which you can see that somebody's level of self-care doesn't necessarily impact their level of burnout as much as I had hypothesized in the beginning. In the middle right side of the slide, you can see burnout levels related to number of years at the agency. Burnout appears to be a little bit higher in the beginning for some people early on, and it's average for those who have been employed for over 15 years at the agency. In the bottom left hand of the slide, you can see burnout levels related to number of years as an LSW, and in this you can see that as there is no huge correlation throughout, there is some consistency towards the latter half of being employed over 20 years, or having an LSW for over 20 years, I'm sorry. Going back to univariate analysis, this is specifically looking at the burnout levels for only 15 employees, and is on the range of 1 to 6, which was the self-reported range of burnout levels before taking it down to the three different categories, with 1 being feeling burned out almost never, and 6 feeling burned out almost all of the time. From this, we can gather that the mean is 2, the mode is 1, the median is 2.46667, the variance is 2.98, and the standard deviation is 1.67 with a range of 5. From this, we can see that at this specific agency and in this program, the level of burnout isn't very high. But that's not considering all other factors of burnout, including the low, medium, high. Conclusions. From this data and the data analysis, we can see that, again, not all community-based social workers are at a high risk for burnout levels within their community-based agencies. As I hypothesized, given a lot of significant data found on the internet. There are some agencies that do pose as a lower risk for burnout, and we can see significantly that this program is specifically one. Implications can include that this assessment didn't include the agency as a whole, it just, again, included this specific program. So I would recommend that a needs assessment be conducted over the entire agency to determine Central Ohio Area of Agency on Aging's overall burnout levels between their employees related to their work, rather than just a specific program, as being in a specific program within the agency can essentially create for a better work environment than the overall agency itself. Some of the limitations involved in this assessment were that there are a small number of employees in this specific program related to the agency. So my sample size was only 15 people, which doesn't capture an overall representation of the program or the agency. The assessment was given on a very short notice. So again, I had to use a convenience sampling method just to make sure that I was able to gather the data and get it from a significant amount of people. The employees, again, were very long term. So once finding that out, I didn't assume that the risk for burnout would be very high, under, again, the assumption that if you're staying at an agency for an extended period of time, then your burnout rate may not be as high. And going along with that, this is a very well supported and established program, receiving a lot of support from the community and the city of Columbus, in which they take care of their employees very well compared to some other community-based agencies that might be nonprofit or lacking support from the community itself. The overall lesson I learned from this assessment is that the next time I conduct a needs assessment, I would do it at a community agency that serves all levels of age and many different populations, as serving a broad range of employees can really potentially affect somebody's level of burnout. And I would also look at agencies that have higher turnover rates to see if burnout was a factor in the continuous job cycle that these agencies are seeing. While I was able to gather a significant amount of data from this agency and to look at how different factors affect an employee's level of burnout, it didn't capture an overall view of burnout within the agency that I had hoped for, given the small sample size and the employees seeming more satisfied with their place of employment than some other places that I have seen. Here are a list of my references, and this is the end of my presentation. Thank you for watching. If there are any questions or comments, I can be reached at my email, which is listed on this slide below. Thank you.